Again, I am the general. I'm the guy who's organizing this whole thing, and hopefully by this point you've watched my first video about the basics of the game, how to read those hit points and defense, attack, and damage stats, how a sample round of the game works, and most importantly, how you win the game. And so, I know we have all these abilities on here and you don't really know what they do yet, but before you can really understand how to use them on a battlefield, you really need to understand your battlefield, because if you look at this field here, come on, if the camera will refocus, it wouldn't do it the last time I tried this, that's better. It's not a flat expanse, it's full of walls and giant crystals and ruined walkways and pits. Even the Nelvon snowfields have some terrain, they've got giant mesas and some snowy territory, and you've got to know how all this affects your battlefield. So we're going to take a look today at how all these colored squares, these terrain features, affect your game of miniatures. And the first major type of terrain is walls. And walls, if you zoom in over here, you see how this room is bordered in magenta. This magenta represents a wall. A wall impedes all movement. You can't move through them unless you're the Dark Woman, and even then, under only certain circumstances. You can't shoot through them, and they will provide cover for you if your miniature is hiding behind them. They are, in short, the big blockers of the game. And not all walls are walls. Take, for example, this giant crystal right here. It is not a wall, but it's outlined in magenta because it's so huge, and you can't move it or move through it or shoot through it, so for all intents and purposes, it is a wall. It will block everything. You can't destroy walls, not even with missiles or grenades. They will just exist to hinder you. So the next major type of terrain we see here is difficult terrain. And that is outlined in yellow. And it says here, movement costs double. What does that mean by that? Let's take an example. This ruined walkway here. Say we had a Durar Scout just standing right there, and we wanted to move it. Normally we could move it 6 squares on a turn and then attack with it, or move it 12 squares with no attack, or attack and move 6. But in this case, if you wanted to move here on the difficult terrain, it would cost double to move on. It would be 2, 4, 6 for his movement, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because moving on a difficult terrain square will cost double. Low objects, which are next, follow a similar rule. They are outlined in green. For example, we have a smaller crystal right here that's outlined in green, and you can walk on a low object, but like difficult terrain, they cost double to move through. And they also provide cover, which makes them very different from difficult terrain. And cover is a rule we're going to cover more thoroughly next lesson, but suffice to say, if your character is hiding around behind them, it would be much harder for, say, Captain Rex right here to shoot our Durar Scout while he's hiding behind this low object than if he were, say, out here in plain sight. So those are low objects, and now we get to the two really interesting terrains. They are pits, and they are doors. And a pit is outlined in orange, and I want to really zoom in here on this ruined walkway, because you see 2 different lines of color right here. If the camera can refocus for me, that'd be great. But you see your yellow here, which is the ruined walkway, and it's the difficult terrain. And over here, it's all outlined in orange. This means a pit. And it's really hard to figure out sometimes when they're not right next to each other, like right here, which one is which. But just use the rules of logic. If it's right here in the middle of nothing, is it going to be a pit or difficult terrain? Meanwhile, this ruined walkway would hardly qualify as a pit. It is quite solid. So obviously, a pit, if you move into it, you will die. If this Durar Scout, just happy as can be, walked into our pit, he would fall and never return. He would be automatically defeated. There's exceptions, of course. You see this little fellow right here. You might recognize him you can tell he's the same droid they used to try and kill Queen Amidala during Attack of the Clones, and he can fly, as you already know. So if he were to try and move into this pit, he'd be just fine, as long as he didn't end his turn in the pit, so he ended right here. If he tried to stay in here willy-nilly and shoot, he would die at the end of his activation because he's still in a pit. It doesn't matter that he can fly, he can't end his turn in a pit. If you want that thing to be alive, you've got to end his turn on solid ground. And this begs the question, what happens if you get pushed back into a pit? Think Obi-Wan Kenobi right here. He has the Force Push ability, Force Push 2. He could push Dooku right back into this pit, and we'd never see him again. But not quite. instead of him going right back into the pit and dying, he has a chance to try and save himself. He'd stop at the very edge of the pit and make what's called a save of 11. And a save, or saving throw, is just a d20 roll, 20-sided die roll. So you're trying for a save of 11. If your roll is 11 or greater, you succeed the save. And Dooku does not die, he just stops at the edge of the pit. If you get 10 or lower, however, Dooku will fall into the pit and he will die. For flying characters, it's different, because obviously they have a much greater chance of staying alive if they get pushed back into a pit. If Obi-Wan were to try and push this ASN assassin droid into the pit, it would just stop at the edge of the pit like normal, only since he can fly, you'd make a save of 6, which is much easier. If you get a 6 or higher, you will succeed and the ASN droid does not die. On the off chance you get a 5 or lower, which is only a 1 in 4 chance but still happens, he will fall into the pit and never be heard from again. The flight cannot protect you completely from a pit. It'll help, but anyone who moves into a pit is at risk of dying if they stay in there. And the last type of terrain is a door. So this door here is outlined in blue rectangles. For all intents and purposes, a door acts as a wall when it's shut. But what if you wanted to open the door? Say you've got Obi-Wan and Captain Rex in there, and you've got Dooku out here, and where's our ASN assassin? Here he is. We have our assassin droid with him. And these two want to get to the door so they can kill Obi-Wan. So what they do is Dooku would go, and he could do his move like normal. If Dooku ends his activation while he's standing next to the door will open. And now our ASN assassin droid can use his blaster or unleash those poisoned creatures on Obi-Wan or Captain Rex, whoever they wanted to use, because the door is, for all intents and purposes, gone while open. But if Obi-Wan were to use his force push and push Dooku away from the door, at the end of Obi-Wan's activation, the door would shut. So whenever a character finishes activating, look at the doors. If somebody is next to the door is open. If no one is next to the door will shut and just be like a wall again. And there are abilities that can force the door open or shut and keep them that way, regardless of who's next to them. We'll go over those under special circumstances later. Suffice to say, if you want to open a door, keep somebody next to it, and thank you for your time.